can go online and probably put in there, okay, what are the boundaries for dating, sexual boundaries for dating? And you can get everything.
Yes.
You're going to get, some people will say, don't even hold hands.
Yeah.
Some of them will say, you know what, you can have oral sex and you'll be fine.
Right.
Like, so you're going to get all of these different answers. And so when you have the internal conviction of this is more about honoring God and what he wants as opposed to what I can or can't do.
Yeah. Every bit of you is sacred by design. As if boundaries, dun dun dun, aren't hard enough. Today, we're talking about sexual boundaries within Christian dating relationships. I'm sure a lot of people right away are expecting all the shoulds and the should nots while dating, and especially because the messages from the church and from the world can be really confusing. But today, this is Kyle we're talking about. This is Regeneration Ministries we're talking about. This is Jesus we're talking about. So we're here to talk about sexual boundaries and a unique change of perspective. All that being said, step one, let's define sexual boundaries.
Okay. So if you think about boundary, the boundary is basically described as or defined as a line that marks the limits of a particular area. So when you think about boundaries, what you think about is, okay, I can go up to a certain point and then this is where I have to stop. I can't go beyond this, right? That's what the boundary is supposed to be. The problem is in dating relationships, that line can move a lot.
For a lot of reasons.
Right. And so, you can say, well, is this line okay? And okay, I can go here and stop, or go this line and then I stop. So it's not clear. It's very subjective based on the people involved. So here's what I like to do. I want to get rid of the word boundaries.
All right.
Okay, we're going to throw that out and suggest something very different. So, and I think this is more aligned with what God is after when he is looking to see what God-honoring relationships look like. And so I think we should call it markers of holiness.
Hey, I like that. The lines are confining. Okay, so tell me why, what is a marker of holiness then?
So if we're talking about markers of holiness, you got to understand what holiness is, right? So when you think about how the Bible defines holiness, it's something sacred or something godly. Okay, so now if you think about that, okay, how do I then take that and apply it to my dating relationship? So you have to be willing to ask yourself some questions. You have to be willing to say, okay, is what I'm thinking about doing with my dating partner, is it sacred and is it godly based on God's definitions? That's what you got to think about.
That's a huge shift right there.
It is. Because I think we always think about what can, or like you said, should or shouldn't do, what can I can't or can't do. We always think of it in that terms. We never shift the perspective up to God.
Yeah.
And say, what does God see as holy and sacred? And so how do we maintain holiness and sacredness within our dating relationship?
Okay, so what else should we be thinking about?
So here's another thing. So in always thinking about, okay, is it okay to do this? I shouldn't do this. I don't think we think about the fact that not every dating relationship is going to end in marriage. Right? It's, things happen, things don't work out. So what you have to think about is, how am I protecting what belongs to my future spouse? Because you can step into sin, and what you don't think about is, oh, but how is this a sin against my future spouse? And I think First Thessalonians in chapter 4, verses 3-6, Paul kind of just talks about this, right? He said, it is God's will that you should be sanctified, that you should avoid sexual immorality. Okay? Well, we all know that, right?
Yeah.
That each of you should learn to control your own body in a way that is holy and honorable, not in passionate lust like the pagans do, who do not know God. And that in this matter, no one should wrong or take advantage of their brother or sister. And so that it means that I have to protect what belongs to my future spouse. And I think you have to be okay with having conversations. Like, I think because the whole boundary thing can be subjective.
Yeah.
You can assume, okay, here's this great Christian person I'm dating. And you think, okay, so our ideas about boundaries have got to be the same. But you might find they're not. And so are you willing to have this conversation about, okay, how are we going to make sure that our relationship is holy? And that's a whole different concept than what can we do or what can't we do?
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
And I like that conversation because the marker of holiness for those who do know God, not the ones who do not know God, for the ones who do know God, is almost like speaking into your identity. So it's affirming of yourself and maintaining your integrity. And it's affirming of your future spouse, whether this person is that person or not, but maintaining their integrity also.
Yeah, and I think too, look, you cannot make a sound decision if you've already gone too far. It's hard your brain does not work like it should when you're at the point of sexual arousal. You don't have even the ability to make a different choice. Because typically that portion of your brain actually starts to shut down. So that you don't have the ability to make the kind of good choice to say, oh, like we don't need to go beyond this.
Right.
And so why not have the conversation beforehand so that I think, some people get into a relationship and they go, gosh, I didn't think he was going to expect me to do this or he was okay with this.
Yeah.
And so then you might be wounded
Yeah.
And feel taken advantage of because your assumption about what your dating partner had the expectations were different.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important.
And that requires maturity and responsibility for a good relationship. You know what I love about this too? But Kyle, I'm excited because I'm just thinking about the idea of these lines and the shoulds and should nots can become the temptation then.
Yes.
To sneak around, to cross over, to jump right over. For whatever the motivation. But these markers of holiness are internal.
Yes.
They're not out there.
They're not out there.
It's inside.
Yeah. And I think, because look, you can go online and probably put in there, okay, what are the boundaries for dating, sexual boundaries for dating? And you're going to get everything.
Yes.
You're going to get, some people are going to say, don't even hold hands.
Yeah.
Some of them will say, you know what, you can have oral sex and you'll be fine.
Right.
Like, so you're going to get all of these different answers. And so when you have the internal conviction of this is more about honoring God and what he wants as opposed to what I can or can't do.
Yeah. Oh, I love the idea of praying through this for the women that I know who are single, who are dating, that internal conviction to be able to pray because it is so personal.
It is personal.
And this is part of who God is. And this is what's so exciting about exploring our sexuality with Jesus is that it's beyond a line. It's beyond a list of do's and don'ts.
Yes.
This is much bigger.
It is.
There's a lot more freedom in considering it this way.
It is. And just think about this, like how awesome is it when you're not thinking just of yourself either. You're thinking, how am I going to honor the person I'm dating? Like, that's huge. because, we always think about ourselves and what the benefit is for us in the dating relationship. But what about you thinking first, you know what? I want to make sure that I honor the person I'm dating.
Mm. This is a marker of holiness. You're a real stinker coming up with this one, aren't you? I like this so much.
Yeah, and I think too, what happens also is if the relationship doesn't work out for whatever reason, you don't walk away like, okay, so you might be hurt that it terminated, but you don't feel like you've given a part of yourself to a person that you shouldn't have. You don't start to feel guilt and shame around that. You can walk away going, you know what, like, and at least I honored this person in this relationship. I honored myself, and so I know that God is pleased with that. And then you can walk away with so much more worth for yourself and value for yourself because you chose to honor God in this way in this dating relationship.
And we're not saying you need 5 markers of holiness.
Right.
Before you enter a relationship. We're not even doing that. This is something to be praying through. But let's, what are some questions that maybe we can pray through, or a practical idea of what a marker of holiness looks like and sounds like to offer as like a guidepost for, oh, okay, that's a good example.
Yeah, I think one of the things to kind of ponder and say, okay, a marker of holiness for me would be, I'm not going to do anything that's going to bring my partner to a place of sexual arousal, right? I'm not going to purposely do that so that I am honoring who he or she is. I think that's one practical way.
Yeah.
I think maybe some other ways are, what does it mean? Like, again, having conversation with this other individual to be able to say, hey, what does holiness look like? What does it mean to be holy? And I think there's some caution in that, like, we're not trying to put in these kind of rules that you can't attain. Sometimes you have these rules that you set out, that you can't, you don't want to make something that's not attainable.
Yeah.
But you want to be able to say, what is really, for me, what does holiness look like? Does it mean, it might even mean for you, you might say, you know what, maybe it means I'm more conscious of the way I dress. That might not be for everybody, right?
Yeah.
But maybe that's what you get convicted about. Maybe also it means that you're not feeding yourself stuff that will cause you to want to engage in other behavior, right? What kind of stuff are you looking at? What kind of things are you reading? What kind of, are you sitting around listening to the love songs all the time that talk about, baby, I love you and I want to be with you and let's,
yes, those get you every time.
Yeah, let's spend the night together songs, right?
Right.
So I think you have to look at the whole of your life in order to really set what your markers are, because they go beyond just this relationship here. And I think when you have those markers, those markers set in other areas of your life, that one it's not so hard.
Yeah.
And you know what? You'll be okay, believe it or not, you'll be okay with telling somebody to kick rocks if they need to.
This is true.
Right? Because you don't no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And you'll be okay with that.
This is so good because you're a single woman. I'm a married woman. Regardless, the markers of holiness are true for both of us.
Absolutely.
And necessary for both of us. They are. Because God is after my heart. God is after your heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What does holiness look like? Have the conversation. Those are two really good. I mean, because even if you're in the midst of a relationship and you're like, ooh, maybe something's not setting right, well, then maybe pray into that.
Yeah.
invite the Lord into
be
that.
okay and know, like know your value and your worth is not based on whether this person stays or goes.
Did you hear that? Did you hear that?
It's not based on whether they stay or go. Mm-hmm. Because God will honor you if the person says, okay, I can't do that. Peace be with you. Let them go. And know that God has something better for you, whatever that looks like. And know that he's going to honor you in that.
Amen.